What's up, y'all? Shuffle here with a Quasimorph vid, and I want to talk about the endgame of Quasimorph. Right now, we're on patch 9.9. It just went live, and it has a lot of nice improvements, some quality of life stuff, as always, some extra goodies, packs were rebalanced, and the meta progression actually got more streamlined and easier to do, so it's less grindy, which is great, because if I recorded this video a week ago, then, or maybe a little bit before that, but regardless, you know, if I recorded this video a while back, then it would have been a little outdated. So I don't think anything is going to get super major overhauled coming up here. So I want to talk about the end game. On other videos talking about Quasimorph, like the new player side and early game and all that, I'll definitely make them. It's just, this is what was kind of jumping out at me first. So I'm going to talk about what the end game looks like and what you will be having when you're prepared for it. So what to be looking for long term. First, the easiest thing to really gauge where you're at is not actually the ship. So if you want to gauge where you're at in terms of like end game, it's actually closer to the tech trees of the companies. There you go. So yeah, if you start getting to like tech 7 plus, they can start dropping like tech 9, tech 10 stuff, technology level. So I would consider when you get to about 7, probably end game. Like early games, like you look at tech levels like 1, 2, mid games, everything in between, up to about 6. And then maybe 7. Yeah, so 7's kind of like the line, but then like after that, this is all definitely end game because it's the strongest stuff, the best armor, and all of that. So that's where you're going to be in terms of the game's timeline. So just be aware of that. The game will be scaling alongside you, or it's dictating the scaling. It's going to be scaling very quickly. So the more you travel and stuff like that, run out the clock, then you should be aware of the tech levels. That's very important. Okay. Now, the ship. The ship is cool. And so with the ship and the meta progression, they actually, this is an older file I had, but it's at the end game stuff, so it's easiest to use. And the meta progression stuff got really, really streamlined. So a lot of the stuff, I checked it on a new file, was made to be a lot cheaper. For instance, like this arsenal and the weaponry workshops where you can modify guns and armor. These used to be 2 of, I'm assuming you know some of the basics of Quasimorph, but these used to be really expensive in terms of like the endgame stuff. You need like 2 armor cases, 2 weapon cases, sometimes like 3, maybe even like 4 for one of them. But overall, if you ever looked at these and it showed you how many you needed for the meta progression, because it'll show you like a number / another number, you would need like 17, 18 of both of these. And these are really hard to come by. And as you can see, they tend to be very expensive. Another thing was a lot of these machines, like the cloning control and the research station, these are really expensive, hard to get. And when you would need them, you need like 4 at a time. So for each branch or whatever to max out your ship and your meta progression and all that, you would need, you know, like 16 of these or 20. And it was a ton. It was very grindy. So they made that better. And just looking at one of these, I'm going to see if I can find something I haven't finished quite yet. They did move some stuff around. So like this capsule, you get to start with it. Really good. This is cheaper. They made the capsule better. And they pushed the space shuttle. This is like a giant, massive inventory because you could run your stuff back to your spaceship, you know, on a mission. And they put this at the very bottom. And then they made the trade module better. And like right here, the cloning tree, they made this a lot more accessible. Training doesn't take like 1 of each turret anymore. It just takes, you know, some data and stuff like that. That means is when your meta progression, which is your ship and all its buildings and stuff like that, all these paths and perks and everything, when these start getting maxed out, you're heading towards endgame, which kind of makes sense, right? That's your meta progression. And there's one that's super important. This is definitely more of an end game thing. You can do this mid game, but The Brandfaturian engine, this is a story mission where you get the necessary things to build it, or at least the one necessary part. It's behind a story quest. And when you get this is just not to really super spoil, I guess, but you can travel through the Quasimorph dimension instead of the human regular Milky Way galaxy dimension. And when you're in there, you can choose to do missions where you like assault the Quasimorph bases directly, and I think they're called dives or delves or something like that, and they're very difficult, and those are endgame content. But also, if you want to travel around the solar system, time stops, so you can get places quickly, technically, without having to deal with losing them on mission timers. So when you start getting these upgrades and you get the Brandfaturian engine, that's kind of where you're at. As far as your mercenaries go, your endgame setups are going to look way more technical than your early game setups, which in the early game, you're wearing regular, literal hoodies and sneakers, and sometimes you find like something that has armor plating and like a thick jacket, and you're using those and like pistols and very rudimentary weapons. In the end game, obviously at the tech level, you're going to get really strong armor and weapons as well, but you can level up your mercs after you get the meta progression, so they can start leveling up and become stronger, and by doing so, that lets you do harder stuff in return. In terms of the loadouts, something that's going to make its way to probably every character are augments. And so augments are when you put in robotic body parts, chips, enhancers, or you replace a limb altogether, for instance. And when you start putting those on, it's going to be really common. Like, a lot of enemies are going to carry them. You're going to have a ton of them eventually, and pretty much you should be slotting these in everywhere. Some of them don't really have a massive downside. Some of them have some pretty harsh ones, but otherwise, it's in your best interest to start collecting these and using them. A lot of them are good for various things, so just keep in mind what they give you access to. And this is just one example. I'm using Percy here because Percy is just a really dependable merc for me, and since I'm in the endgame thing, this is kind of what I'm trying to talk about here. So augments, if you put on a whole limb, that's an augment. So there's two different things, and you can see they have implant slots or sockets, and then implants are the little chip icon. And so for this, we have like a cyber heart, which I don't know if I have another, but right here, like this implant, this is a knee implant, whereas if you put on an entire leg, this is an augment. So you put on a rubber leg from the the cuddly robot, and then you can put other augments into it. So this is really late game, to the point where I wouldn't use your really good augments if you happen to find one out of, chopping someone up or like a reward. I wouldn't put the super good augments in until much later, when your mercs will be just, a little more hardy and not die as easily, or just throw them in right away. Who cares? It's your game, right? You can have fun. So for one example, Percy's got a little bit. So he's got, extra projectile, wound received, less scatter, load weight. Percy can handle these things, especially with Scouts of Hades. It's a class where you can, reduce calories and stuff. So he's able to just go longer on stuff. But otherwise, we'll talk about this later. But when you start modding class chips and merc chips, like Dismantler does not come on Scouts of Hades. I put that in there. And so you'll see that when you get into those endgame scenarios, you can modify the classes and really just raise the power level on everything you have access to. And that's how you modify things to be really strong and handle all that ridiculous stuff that you're going to come up against. Back to Percy and his augments. He only has a couple right here. He's got an entire arm, which I think it's this one. Yeah. So he's got a military arm and a servo knee, which I don't know if I have an extra one, but yeah. So just always look for interesting combos with the augments. And you can put early augments in. Like, you'll find a lot of the rubberized limbs and the regular controller cyborg limbs. You'll find those quite frequently. But the military ones come a bit later, so it's usually okay to save those. With another example, I'm going to assume it's Martian mech, which is pretty much ad mech, I would say, yeah. So this is someone I just replaced everything. So they have like all robotic body parts everywhere, and everything is implanted as well to have extra stuff. So I don't think this guy gets addictions, if I can see him. Looking here. Oh no, he does. So it's just, he's also really good for extracting things. And, you know, this is another more late game class, which is the Martian mech infantry. And you get a lot of robotic stuff, a lot of bonuses for having augments. And yeah, it's really good overall. So, but I'll do a separate video on classes too. Otherwise, that's what I'm trying to get at here. With all of your mercs, you're going to start putting in a lot of robotic body parts and then modifying them with your implants and have some really, really strong capabilities that you normally couldn't have, especially because when you start putting in these augments, they usually have something like minus HP when you put them on. So it's kind of like the trade-off is you lose your real life vitality or your flesh vitality for the augments, which are a little bit stronger in different ways. So it's the trade-off. But one of these ship upgrades that I was referring to lets you modify, or not modify them, but it removes all of the max HP penalties from augments. And that's when you can really just start slotting all of them in, because they don't have the main penalty anymore. They have some penalties, but not all of them. The next late game aspect I want to talk about are pacts. So pacts are all Quasimorph god level things. Like, you put a pact on a character and they are pledged to some Quasimorph powerful entity, and they draw power from that with cost. They recently redid these. That was the point of the last patch, is they redid these so the pacts are stronger, easier to use, and also more fun to use, because some of them just didn't feel great to use at all ever. And some of them were so punishing, it was like, I will never press this because my character just dies, essentially, when I do it. So, I mean, I guess you want to finish the mission or something, but otherwise, the reason packs are late game is because, for one, in terms of mission rewards, if you look at any of the Quasimorph legions, so Venus, or Venus Coon as Ranger and I call him very affectionately, you look here, his packs are at the end. So again, high tech level. So all these little weird masks that you can put on a character, these are the packs, and they all do different stuff. And you'll find more than just like these 5. The main source of these are barons. So if you go to your missions, and in the bottom you have the ecolapse meter, the Quasimorph gauge, whatever you want to call it, and it's not absentia, so it levels up every time people start dying. And when it hits 1,000, it summons a baron. A baron's like a boss. When you take down a baron, doesn't matter what faction or whatever it belongs to, it's going to drop a pact with it. The pact will be faction specific, but every single baron will drop one when you kill them, and so that's kind of like your way to get them. And barons are very difficult, so that's why it's another late game thing. You can try and fight them early, you're probably dead, but there will come a point, usually around like Tech 4, 5, 6. Like, if you really know what you're doing, you can, fight them earlier. So that's where you're going to get all your packs from, and everyone, you're just going to start slapping them on. So I know I have Percy with one, and I want to say someone else. Is it Francis? Yeah. So I got another one here, and I think there's a third one, if I can remember. Just to show you that, they get spread around and all that. I think it was Lucas. Once everyone starts to have these packs equipped to them, you will be able to remove them also. There's an item that lets you break a pact, and you may have seen it already. You'll find these before you start finding the packs, but I gotta remember where they're at. But they're just a piece of paper, it's these. So just breaking the pact. You hit it, and presumably it takes it off. I actually haven't popped one of these yet. I could. I probably should. Otherwise, that's it for packs right now. However, if you look at the research part of your Magnum, like the ship, you have a section for packs. They haven't put this in yet. I thought it might come with this update. It might come with 1.0, but there's a whole tree here for using packs and putting them on, presumably, and modifying them even, which would be kind of crazy because they're already pretty strong. Another super late game thing is going to be the management unlock. This lets you take control of a minor corporation, and when it says take control, you still play the game normally as you do, where you fly around the solar system and do missions. However, now you're in control of that company, so you have a vested interest in seeing them survive, because not only do you get perks for assisting them, such as extra mission bonuses, and you can change the faction type. I don't quite know what this does yet. Like, you can change it to a Quasimorph faction if you really want to. I don't know if that's just flavor. Otherwise, the production speed goes up, the mission consequences get better, so you can have, like, extra stuff. And then you get allies on proxy missions. So, in this game, I took over Planet Bridge. At the time, it was just to test it, because they were close enough for me to take over. I wanted to take over a different minor corporation, but the CEO was on Saturn, and I just didn't want to fly out there. So when you take this over, you're in control of it, and all of this tech and stuff like that, you know, you're always going to be super friendly with them, obviously. But if you ever go to one of their strongholds, for instance, this is kind of broken. So I'm going to see if they changed it in this patch. I don't think they did. I don't remember reading anything about that. But even though I have all these credits, everything in here from that faction is free. So that's why you have a vested interest in helping them succeed, because every time you buy from your puppet faction, you're able to get all of the stuff they make for free. So that's why the production speed's important. And this really imbalances the game's economy, especially if you help a minor corp take over a lot of assets. And then that way you can just grab just tons of stuff for free and have access to everything. So it's a very, very strong thing with the late game. And it's cool though, it's worth it for sure. But also in terms of that late game, is it research? No. It's very, very late. Like, it's all the way at the bottom. Even with the changes to make this stuff a little bit cheaper, getting all the way down, it's still at the very end. So you're not getting this for a while. Something I touched on earlier that I'm going to talk about now are chip mods. So stuff like the arsenal and weaponry with the gunsmith workshop, and you even have it with cloning. Also important to note though, augmentations is another super late game upgrade. This is where you get to really get all the bonuses. It's all these last three, I guess. But you get access to really strong ways to use augments, so you can always get them on amputation. You can have a better chance of extracting it. I think this used to be stronger, or it had an extra node and they nerfed it. Totally fine. And you can even put on like Quasimorph stuff. So you can put on like giant Quasimorph limbs, or in another case, I have like a giant Quasimorph shoulder. Just, you know, giant shoulder muscle. When you're doing these upgrades and stuff, you know, you can always increase the strength of things you have unlocked. Like right now I have access to Frame. I forgot about that. Frame's a very late game, very powerful armor set, and you can have a ton of levels on it, obviously, and then you can just modify it and add a ton of stuff. So if you, just for the sake of like the extreme, the limit, you know, if you wanted to give this thing 117 of one resist, it would cost you 108 ceramic plates, 19 chips, 19 of these other chips, the green chips, and then 125 high-techs. That's the most expensive, because the high-tech chips are, in fact, the hardest to get. They're late game. But that's the point. You have these very expensive upgrades you can do, and you can add a ton of stuff to it. Like anything you have the ability to craft. So that's why all your crafting recipes are important. You can add the augments to them, and they just get perpetually stronger. So you can just change all your guns, make them stronger. You can change all of your armor, make it stronger. You can customize everything you want to do, and it's a really big system. And since it's so resource heavy, I haven't done too much with it yet. The most I've done is like added a lot of damage to the XTS. There's a tech level 7 gun that I found, and you know, I used it on a few people, so I just started upgrading it. But that's one example. So you can do your armor, your weapons. Another one you can do are your mercenaries. So if you want to upgrade your mercenaries and give them new stuff, you can. And it's just same thing. It costs a bunch, and the mercenary upgrades are actually, I believe, limitless. So you can have them go way, way, way far and do insane stuff. You know, if you play for 400 hours on one file, you kind of deserve to break the game by doing so. Otherwise, when you upgrade mercenaries, it's all their primary stats. So, like, their aim for both types of aim, crit, life, pain threshold, calories, but you can also swap their talents, which is kind of crazy. So every merc you have access to gives you their personal talent in the pool, so you can actually just recreate certain things if you really like combinations and put them on different mercs to make them stronger. For instance, you may like Sniper. Sniper's a great talent. You can just put it on every single class. Now all of a sudden everyone's Victoria Boudica if you really wanted to. So it's really open-ended there, which I like. So you can just do what you want to, really fine-tune your whole roster, and I think it's beautiful. So that's another thing you're going to be doing at Endgame, is modifying your mercs. Keep in mind, if you do modify them, they have to die or get recloned right here in order to get the new version, because they don't have it the moment you put it on. So kind of sucks, but it's also a thing where it's like, you come back stronger, you know? The final one in terms of upgrading are the class chips. And these get really, really nutty. So as I said before, Dismantler does not come in Scout to Hades. It's supposed to be something else. I'm sure I'll remember it if I see it. I'll say it's Blind Fury is what's supposed to be there, but you know, instead of getting just a ton of damage, I opted for Dismantler, where you get a ton of accuracy too, because some enemies dodge, you know, very well. And it starts off, you know, 25 accuracy, 10% damage, activates on a wound, and when it's max level, again, we're going to look at Percy, because all of his stuff is maxed out. It's 40 accuracy and 25% damage, and so I only changed that so far on this one, but you can change just tons and tons of stuff. Like, if you find a good perk like Dismantler, just put it on everything if you want to. You don't have to do this. You know, I'm not saying Dismantler's the best perk in the game, but I value accuracy, and it's kind of annoying sometimes. So you can turn your classes into just super versions of them if you find certain things you don't like. And even though you have passive and trigger perks, I think you can just put whatever on whatever, which is kind of, yeah, like if I go all the way down, I could put Blind Fury in this slot. Even though this is a passive perk, I can give it a trigger perk. So things that have a condition to turn on, you can still put them on any slot. I kind of wish this wasn't the case. But at the same time, I still understand, because that way you still have more ownership of what you're doing. So keep that in mind. Again, late game, in terms of the chip mods, because that's the whole point of this section, you're going to have modded armor, modded weapons, modded mercs, modded classes. And you can just do whatever you like and just make a whole fleet of super soldiers. If you play the entire game and you're like, I really enjoyed Tunnel Rats and like Phoenix Brigade, it's like that's all you're going to use on everything, that's fine. You can modify it so all of those those two classes have everything you want specifically, and then you can modify the mercs to the point where they fit those classes better as well. The final endgame indicator as for what endgame will look like is something many of us are probably understanding just by looking at this, is you're gonna have a ton of resources that are just so like copious. Like, it's a very high numerical amount of stuff that you have access to the point where you're done upgrading the ship, so you can just barter away a lot of this stuff, and you don't even need to barter sometimes. Like, you just have enough credits and stuff with a company and it doesn't matter. The point also is, when you hit a level like this where everything's modded and you have tons of resources, like back here, all of these are parts for crafting for the most part, besides the machines. So all this stuff is to like make other items or repair items. And being able to do that, for instance, if we look at our conveyor, which has a lot of stuff now because it's highly upgraded, you know, when you go all the way down, you can just look at your stuff, and we have a modified XTS, and we have all the stuff to make it. You can make 5 or more. You know, in this case, I probably have enough stuff to make 24, just looking at the lamps. Yeah, you can just make a ton of whatever you want. It's modified, it's strong, and the deaths of your mercs now, at that point in Endgame, are nothing. Like, they do matter a little bit because you'll lose the ranks, I think, on your classes for leveling them up, which kind of sucks. And not just the class, but also, like, the military rank, I believe. So you're not going to have, like, sergeants and stuff anymore. They're going to go back down. And being able to level them up after that is not going to be as hard either, because you're going to have a lot of things such as the books. There's a lot of, these are cases, but you'll have access to all of the various data tablets and stuff, and you can see here it gives XP to certain perks, so you can just level up perks the moment someone respawns. Like, you pick them back up from, you know, the cloning because they died in the last mission, and you want to send them right back out. You give them the same class, and he just starts slamming all of these perk growth things, and they level up very quickly. You also have access to training, so you can put people in here, and every set amount of time, they're going to level up their perks. And so the main point here is that when you have all these resources, the meta progression, all the augments and everything, the chip mods, you're going to have like giant super soldiers that will still likely die at points, because Quasimorph is a very lethal game. It kind of sucks sometimes until you really get used to it and decide if you like that type of gameplay, game style, because it's incredibly lethal for you, to the point where if you're under-geared and don't have some of these augments and other level ups, like, you'll turn a corner and just die, and that sucks. Or you'll be severely injured. But the point is that when you're in that position as well, you likely have access to stuff that lets you kill the enemy just as fast. So yes, you can turn a corner and get shot and just drop dead, but if you are playing the map a little carefully and strategically, and you draw enemies out, for instance, like you shoot the door instead of opening it so they come out towards you, your weapon can take out like 2 or 3 at a time, you know, so it's a very lethal game, but it goes both ways. That's what you're looking at, though. So when you have all those upgrades, meta progression, the mods, the class chips and everything, and you can just pump out gear that you can craft, like good gear, or you just have a ton of gear banked up that's really good, that's endgame for sure. So you'll get to the point where death largely doesn't matter outside of just failing the mission. I wouldn't consider the video super spoilery until like this point. Yeah, you know, I'm showing some endgame stuff and gear, but for the most part, gear gets better. So like everyone kind of understood that, right? However, what I am going to show is pretty spoilery. So if you just don't want to finish right here, I understand. If you want to, because the video's over after this, thanks for watching. Or if you want to just listen but not look, that's also acceptable. I don't know what you're okay with there, but otherwise you got about like 5 seconds. I'm going to show off the Brandfaturian engine and what that looks like, because I think it's too cool to not show. Okay. When you get the engine built, again, you have to do a story mission, and that's another part of the end game that we don't have too much of yet. There are various quest lines in the game. It may not seem like it at first, but there are a few. And finishing those are obviously endgame stuff. For instance, with the Venus war, because it's like 2 factions warring on Venus. It's the Feathered Masks and Tet's clan, or we call it Venus Coon, me and Ranger, as I said. These two just go to like all-out war and just start fighting each other, although Venus does fight everyone pretty much. The end of this quest line is Shalmara. Part of it is her giving you a pact to use against Venus, and the clip that they showed from the Quasimorph Twitter account is what sounds like the final mission or one of the final missions, where Shalmara says, go defeat this boss. They don't show you what the boss mechanics are, but they say, go defeat this boss, and the Feathered Mask Legion is yours to command. And that's pretty cool. So your endgame is going to be those quest lines and resolving stuff, because everyone, Venus is like the ultimate evil, at least at the start. They got unleashed on the galaxy by pure, you know, human hubris for the most part. And everyone is taking it as a serious threat, but there's also, just in terms of the lore, there's a lot of propaganda trying to deny the existence of the Emerald Empire. And so one of those endgame things, besides the missions, and I'm sorry for burying the lead here, is Brandfaturian Engine. And this thing is honestly, like, really creepy the first, like, couple times I saw it. So you can just see all the Quasi-Lords every time you go to one of their planets. And there's no longer a giant solar system of asteroids and moons and space stations. It's just a few giant space palaces of these Quasimorph lords. And you do descents into them, which are, I think, either infinite floors or very, very long missions, and you get stuff from them. As you can see here, Duggar is the moon, but it is taking kind of the place of Earth right now. And like I said, out here in the Brandfaturian Engine is really creepy to me, and it took a little bit to get used to. The sun is a gigantic black hole. Instead, space is warping around it. And since time is frozen, the stock market doesn't do any changes. It no longer matters to you. And if you look at the system map, all you have are the various Quasimorph locations. And so you can go flying to different ones and do a descent on those. And this is probably Saturn all the way out here in the Styx. So yeah, you can do descents. And I'm not quite sure if I want to show that yet, but that might be a different video. Otherwise, thanks for watching. As always, you know, if you want to see more Quasimorph, if you have questions and other stuff, let me know, because this is a really fun game. I love showing it, and people do like it, but I also know it's hard AF. So being able to have any clarity on basic mechanics and endgame and all that is probably really helpful. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.